Container plants look perfect in May, but half of them are dead by July. Drainage holes seem adequate. Watering happens on schedule, yet the results remain disappointing. The problem rarely stems from lack of effort, but rather from several critical mistakes that even experienced gardeners make without realizing it. Understanding these errors transforms container gardening from a source of frustration into a reliable system that thrives all summer long. Plant roots need oxygen just as much as they need water, and when drainage holes are absent or insufficient, the soil becomes a waterlogged swamp. Standing water displaces air from the soil, causing roots to suffocate and rot even while the leaves still appear green and healthy. A container without proper drainage becomes a death trap where excess moisture has nowhere to escape, creating anaerobic conditions that encourage pathogenic fungi and bacteria. At minimum, 4 to 5 holes measuring half an inch to 1 inch in diameter should be drilled into the bottom of every pot regardless of size. Decorative containers without drainage can serve as outer sleeves with a plastic pot inside that has proper holes, leaving a gap for water to drain into. The common misconception that a layer of gravel at the bottom replaces drainage holes is dangerously wrong because water still accumulates in the soil, creating a saturated zone directly beneath the roots. A simple test involves pouring water into the container and confirming that excess liquid flows freely through the bottom within seconds. Glazed ceramic pots often come without holes, and drilling through them requires a special masonry bit and patience to avoid cracking. Signs of drainage problems include soil that stays soggy days after watering, a sour smell coming from the pot, or plants that wilt despite moist soil, which indicates root rot rather than drought stress. A small pot restricts the root system so severely that plants cannot access sufficient nutrients and water, even with diligent care. Tomato, pepper, or large flowering plant roots quickly fill a small volume, spiraling around and forming a dense mass that cannot absorb moisture efficiently. Most vegetable crops require a minimum of 4 to 5 gallons per plant, while indeterminate tomatoes need 8 to 10 gallons to produce well throughout the season. Insufficient soil volume dries out rapidly during summer heat, demanding watering twice daily and creating constant stress for both plant and gardener. An oversized container presents problems too because excess soil around a small root system holds too much moisture, slowing growth and increasing the risk of root diseases. The general rule suggests that pot diameter should roughly match the size of the mature plant above ground, while depth should accommodate root length, typically 8 to 12 inches for most annuals. Herbs like basil or parsley thrive in containers holding 1 to 2 gallons, but lettuce needs at least 12 inches of width to develop a full rosette. Size mistakes manifest gradually with plants that seem to grow but remain stunted, produce poorly, develop small leaves, and yellow quickly under any stress. Checking whether roots emerge from drainage holes or form circles visible when the plant is lifted indicates that repotting into a larger container is overdue. Soil from the vegetable garden or flower bed seems like a free alternative to purchased potting mix, but in containers it compacts, loses air circulation, and turns into a dense brick. Garden soil contains clay particles that clump together in the confined space of a pot, creating an impenetrable mass where roots struggle to penetrate. Specialized container potting mixes contain peat moss, coconut coir, perlite, or vermiculite that provide drainage, aeration, and the ability to retain appropriate moisture without waterlogging. Garden soil also carries weed seeds, pest larvae, and disease spores that multiply far more aggressively in the enclosed environment of a container than in open ground. Quality potting mix feels light and fluffy, absorbs water readily, and does not form a hard crust on the surface after watering and drying. If garden soil must be used, it should be mixed with commercial potting mix in a ratio no greater than 1/3, with additional perlite added for loosening and compost for fertility. The mistaken belief that natural soil is superior to bagged products ignores the fact that in container gardening, the physical properties of the growing medium matter more than its origin. Problems become evident when water pools on the surface instead of soaking in, or when dried soil cracks and pulls away from the container walls. Heavy soil also makes large pots nearly impossible to move and puts excessive weight on balconies or roof gardens, where load limits matter. Container plants depend entirely on nutrients within the limited soil volume, and these reserves deplete much faster than in garden beds. Frequent watering leaches soluble nutrients through drainage holes, and without regular feeding, plants begin starving within a month of planting. Early signs of nutrient deficiency include pale green or yellowing lower leaves, stunted growth, and small flowers or fruits. Nitrogen drives leafy growth and stem development. Phosphorus is critical for flowering and fruit set, and potassium strengthens disease resistance and stress tolerance. Balanced fertilizer with a 10-10-10 or 20-20-20 formula works for most container crops, though switching to a higher phosphorus formula like 5-10-10 during bloom and fruiting stages improves yields. Liquid fertilizers absorb faster and more evenly than granular types, while organic options like fish emulsion or seaweed extract act gently and enhance beneficial soil microbes. Feeding frequency depends on fertilizer type, with concentrated liquids applied every 2 weeks, dilute solutions used weekly, and slow-release granules mixed into soil at planting time lasting 3 to 4 months. Over-fertilization causes problems too, including salt buildup that shows as white crust on soil or pot rims, burned leaf edges, and excessive leafy growth at the expense of flowers or fruit. Flushing containers with plain water every few weeks helps prevent salt accumulation, and choosing fertilizers specifically labeled for container use ensures the formula matches the unique conditions of pot culture. Many gardeners water containers during midday heat when evaporation rates peak and water droplets on leaves can act like tiny magnifying glasses, causing burn spots. Early morning watering allows plants to absorb moisture before temperatures rise, ensuring they enter the hottest part of the day fully hydrated. Evening watering works too, but leaves foliage wet overnight, which can encourage fungal diseases in humid climates or during cool weather. The worst approach involves sporadic watering, where containers get drenched one day, then ignored for several days until soil becomes bone dry. This cycle of feast and famine stresses plants severely, causing blossom end rot in tomatoes, bitter cucumbers, cracked carrots, and premature bolting in lettuce and herbs. Container soil temperature also matters because watering with ice-cold water during extreme heat can shock roots, while the ideal temperature is lukewarm or at least not drastically different from soil temperature. Automatic drip irrigation systems solve timing and consistency problems by delivering measured amounts at programmed intervals, though they require initial investment and setup. Watering needs change throughout the growing season as plants mature and root systems expand, so the schedule from May will not work in July when foliage has doubled and temperatures have increased. Checking soil moisture by inserting a finger 2 inches deep provides more accurate information than relying on surface appearance, since the top layer dries first while deeper soil may still be adequately moist. The temptation to fill every inch of container space with seedlings creates a lush look initially but results in disaster as plants compete for light, water, and nutrients. Overcrowded containers produce weak, leggy stems as plants stretch toward light, and airflow between plants decreases, creating humid conditions perfect for powdery mildew, botrytis, and other fungal diseases. Root systems intertwine and compete for the same limited resources, meaning every plant suffers rather than just one thriving. Seed packets and plant tags provide spacing requirements based on garden bed conditions, but container spacing should actually be slightly more generous because roots cannot spread as freely. A 12-inch pot comfortably holds 1 tomato plant, or 3 to 4 lettuce seedlings, or 5 to 6 radish plants, but trying to squeeze 2 tomatoes into that space guarantees poor performance from both. Mixed containers with different plants require even more careful planning, because aggressive growers like mint or sweet potato vine quickly dominate, shading out slower companions. The rule of thriller, filler, and spiller works well when the thriller occupies the center, fillers surround it with appropriate spacing, and spillers trail over the edge without crowding the root zone. Thinning seedlings feels wasteful but produces better results than leaving them crowded, and the thinned seedlings can often be transplanted into other containers or added fresh to salads. Observing how much space mature plants actually occupy in successful container gardens provides better guidance than guessing or following ground-based spacing charts. Placing sun-loving plants like tomatoes, peppers, or basil in shady spots produces disappointing results no matter how perfect other care may be. Most edibles and flowering annuals need 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight daily to photosynthesize efficiently, develop strong stems, and produce abundant blooms or fruit. Partial shade means 4 to 6 hours of sun, while full shade receives less than 4 hours, and confusing these categories leads to mismatched plants and locations. Balconies, patios, and decks often have microclimates, where one area receives full blazing sun all afternoon while another corner stays shady most of the day. Moving containers periodically to track sun patterns throughout the growing season reveals which spots truly qualify as full sun and which only receive morning light. South-facing locations in the northern hemisphere get the most intense sunlight. West-facing areas receive hot afternoon sun, east-facing spots enjoy gentler morning light, and north-facing spaces remain relatively shady. Containers offer the advantage of mobility so plants can be repositioned if initial placement proves wrong, unlike permanent garden beds where mistakes cannot be easily corrected. Shade-tolerant options like lettuce, spinach, arugula, and many leafy greens actually prefer protection from intense afternoon sun in hot climates, while full sun plants languish in excessive shade by becoming leggy, pale, and unproductive. Reflected heat from walls, pavement, or windows can intensify sun exposure beyond what seems obvious, sometimes creating conditions too harsh even for sun lovers during extreme heat waves. Matching plant requirements to actual available light rather than wishful thinking about conditions makes the difference between thriving containers and constant disappointment. Allowing spent flowers to remain on plants signals the end of reproductive duty, triggering plants to cease blooming and start setting seed. Regular deadheading removes faded blooms before seed formation begins, encouraging continuous flower production throughout the season instead of one brief flush. Petunias, marigolds, zinnias, and many other annuals respond dramatically to deadheading by producing twice as many flowers as unpruned plants. Herbs benefit from regular harvesting and trimming, which promotes bushier growth and delays flowering that makes leaves bitter and tough. Tomato plants need pruning of suckers that emerge between main stem and branches, especially for indeterminate varieties that grow indefinitely without this intervention. Removing yellowing lower leaves improves air circulation and reduces disease risk while redirecting energy toward new growth and fruit production. Leggy container plants can be cut back by 1/3 to encourage branching and fuller shape, though timing this pruning correctly for the specific plant type matters. Some flowers like calibrachoa and verbena benefit from mid-season shearing where the entire plant gets cut back by half, shocking it into vigorous regrowth and renewed blooming. The pruned material often provides cuttings that root easily in water or moist soil, creating free new plants to expand the container collection. Neglecting this maintenance allows plants to become rangy, unproductive, and disease-prone, while spending just 10 minutes weekly with clean, sharp pruners keeps them compact, healthy, and attractive. Black or dark-colored pots absorb intense sunlight and can heat soil to temperatures that literally cook roots and kill beneficial microorganisms. Research shows that black containers in full sun can reach internal temperatures 15 to 20 degrees higher than the surrounding air temperature. Root damage from heat stress shows as wilting even when soil is moist, yellowing leaves, stunted growth, and eventual plant death if conditions continue. Light-colored containers reflect more heat, keeping soil cooler and roots healthier, especially important in southern states or during heat waves anywhere. Terracotta and unglazed clay pots help moderate temperature through evaporative cooling as moisture wicks through the porous material, though they also dry out faster and require more frequent watering. Double potting involves placing a dark decorative container inside a larger light-colored pot with a gap between them for air circulation and insulation. Applying reflective mulch on the soil surface or painting dark containers with light-colored outdoor paint provides cheaper solutions than replacing all containers. Positioning containers so they receive morning sun but afternoon shade during the hottest months protects roots from extreme temperatures while still providing adequate light. Container material also affects temperature, with plastic heating faster than ceramic, wood staying relatively cool but deteriorating over time, and metal conducting heat so efficiently that it can burn plants unless insulated or painted. Monitoring soil temperature with a simple thermometer helps identify problem containers that need relocation or color modification before heat damage becomes irreversible. Small problems in containers escalate quickly because pests reproduce rapidly in the concentrated environment, and diseases spread easily among crowded plants. Checking containers every few days for chewed leaves, sticky residue, discolored spots, or visible insects allows intervention before infestations become overwhelming. Aphids cluster on tender new growth and multiply explosively, but a strong spray of water or insecticidal soap application catches them early before populations explode. Whiteflies flutter up in clouds when disturbed, and yellow sticky traps placed near containers monitor their presence and trap adults before they lay eggs. Spider mites cause stippled yellow leaves and fine webbing, thriving in hot, dry conditions, but increasing humidity and spraying with water disrupts their life cycle. Fungal diseases like powdery mildew appear as white coating on leaves and spread rapidly in containers with poor air circulation, but removing affected leaves and improving spacing prevents further spread. Blossom end rot shows as dark, sunken spots on tomato or pepper bottoms and results from calcium deficiency caused by irregular watering rather than actual disease. Caterpillars and beetles often go unnoticed until significant damage occurs, making hand-picking during evening inspection an effective organic control method. Isolating new plants for a week or two before placing them near established containers prevents introducing pests or diseases that may not show symptoms immediately. Using clean tools, fresh potting soil, and sterilized containers for each season reduces disease carryover that can devastate an entire collection of plants within weeks. Container gardening fails most often not from lack of care, but from repeating preventable mistakes that sabotage even dedicated efforts. These errors compound each other, where poor drainage leads to root rot, wrong soil causes nutrient lockout, inadequate feeding weakens disease resistance, and improper watering stresses plants beyond recovery. Understanding the specific challenges of container growing transforms these obstacles into manageable tasks that become routine with practice. The confined environment of pots means every decision matters more than in garden beds, where plants access larger resources and recover more easily from mistakes. Success comes from recognizing that container plants depend entirely on the conditions provided, with no natural buffer to compensate for errors in drainage, nutrition, watering, or placement. Start by fixing the fundamental issues of container size, drainage, and proper potting mix, then build consistent routines for watering, feeding, and maintenance. Each season teaches new lessons about which varieties thrive in containers, how local climate affects needs, and which shortcuts actually work versus those that cause more problems. The goal is not perfection, but creating a system where plants receive what they need without constant emergency interventions. If this helped identify mistakes that have been holding back container garden success, try implementing these corrections one at a time rather than overhauling everything at once.